I would give it a try and see how it turned out. Let me know what you think. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 3 in the Tomlinson text, the role of a teacher in a differentiated classroom. The first point of discussion is going to be best practices. So what are the best practices in the classroom? In differentiated instruction, we know that the best practices are whatever works for a particular student. And we know that that's not going to be the same thing for every student. There are some things that might work well with one student that doesn't work with another student. And I'm not suggesting that you as a teacher can engage 100% of the students 100% of the time, but we have to be able to shift what we're doing in order to accommodate all of our students. If you look on page 18 in the text, you will see a list of what the authors consider best practices. Alright, so leading a differentiated classroom, what does it look like? Well, you have to play many roles. A lot of teachers have trouble stepping outside their comfort zone when it comes to teaching in a differentiated classroom. They're accustomed to being the keeper of the knowledge and standing in the front of the room and dispensing it, and then have students recite it back. When we move into differentiated instruction, your role is going to change. Instead of being the teacher in the traditional sense, you're now becoming a facilitator of learning, and that includes a lot of different roles. The first one that they talk about is the role of the coach. The coach is generally thought of as the great motivator. The coach gets everything ready for the team. He's the psychologist, the trainer, part mom, part dad, motivates players to do their best, builds the team spirit, teaches players about the concept of team and the greater good, just gives direction and leadership. The next role to think about is that of the conductor. The conductor is the consolidator, getting everyone to work together to make that beautiful piece of music. It's his job to pull people together. They may not have worked together before, they may not know one another, they don't play the same instruments, but he puts all the individual sounds together and creates harmony. The one thing that he doesn't do is play the music. The next role we're going to look at is like a jazz musician, the great innovator. And what do we mean by innovator? That means you kind of have to think on your feet. If something's not working, you have to change directions. A piece might need to be longer, a piece might need to be shortened, something new might need to be thrown in. You improvise, you make everything work together, you direct it, you change it. You don't necessarily follow the written plan 100% of the time. Alright, we're going to talk about the rules of thumb, of which there are 5 listed in the textbook. The first one talks about higher order thinking skills. We're going to discuss engagement, balance, the clearness of your key concepts, and assessment. Alright, first the key concepts. You have to be clear on your key concepts and give meaning and structure to what you're teaching. Kids have to be able to understand why they're doing what they're doing, why they're doing what you're asking them to do. So when you have those key concepts laid out, it helps the kids make connections between the topics. They find their school experiences more memorable, they're more engaging. You just have to make sure they know what they're going to do and why they're doing it. Next, we're going to talk about assessment. And it says to think of assessment as a roadmap. And a lot of people think of assessment as the test, as the culmination. It's the very last thing we do, and it's just simply not. When you look at assessment across the board, there are so many ways to learn about your students, to learn about learners. It's not something that the kids are necessarily doing. It's something that you also need to do. You need to look at what you're doing. You need to look at what they're doing. You need to get to know your students. You need to have that roadmap. It's a general guide, but you can't be afraid to take that exit to go see the world's biggest ball of yarn, so to speak. You meet them where they are. You address their interests. The main purpose of assessment in the end is to allow your kids to demonstrate their knowledge and skills. And there are many, many ways to do that, and we will get into those individually as we get further into the chapters. All right, the next thing is higher order thinking skills. We can't always focus on the knowledge. Application, synthesis, all the creativity, it all has to come in at some point. It's not fair to students to have your lower level learners only working at the knowledge stage when other people are working at the analysis or the creativity. They can't be pigeonholed into that so that all they're ever doing is learning facts. And too often in times, that's what is happening. And we have to engage everyone's higher order thinking skills wherever they are. You would be surprised at the number of kids who can't memorize multiplication tables, but are yet very creative and able to apply the knowledge and synthesize it and evaluate it and all the things that Bloom's asks us to do at the higher end. So we have to address every student at those higher order levels. All right, there is an adage out there that says engage me or enrage me. Often when children misbehave in school, it's out of frustration or boredom. So the way to do that is to keep them engaged. If you keep them engaged, they won't be frustrated, they won't be bored, they'll be focused on their schoolwork. Now, it may be a little naive to think that we can keep 100% of the children engaged 100% of the time. There are going to be times when things creep in. But how do we do that? How do we keep them engaged? Well, that's where your knowledge of your student comes in, your assessment of them. You get to know your students, you plan activities for them that are engaging for them on an individual level. All right, the next thing we talk about is balance. So there has to be balance between student-selected activities and teacher-selected activities. And what that will do is it keeps the students more engaged. It allows them to be responsible for their own learning, and it allows you to act in the role of facilitator, but you give them choices to make. Okay, and the student should be matched with tasks that are compatible with their interests, their learning styles, their readiness, And sometimes that's going to be a task that you design, and sometimes it will be a task that they design. But there needs to be a healthy balance between the two. That way they have ownership in their own learning. Okay, we will discuss each of these ideals in more detail as we go through the chapters and focus in on key components of differentiation.